changes are coming to the popular YouTube talk show Hot Ones.
Media company Buzzfeed announced a deal to sell the studio behind the show, with the sale clocking in at $82.5 million. Buyers include, oh boy, Soros Fund Management.
Yeah, I kind of cleared my throat before this one, too.
Yeah? This will clear our throats for us.
Yep, and everything else.
Hot Ones debuted in 2015 and has made a name for itself interviewing high-profile celebrities while eating progressively spicier chicken wings. Big shot interviewees include Jennifer Lawrence, Paul Rudd, Post Malone, Margot Robbie and more. The show, get this, has garnered billions of views and has 14 million subscribers on YouTube.
BuzzFeed is reportedly $124 million in debt and sold Hot Ones in an attempt to pay back the owed money this month. The sale comes as the media industry has undergone some other major changes. A bankruptcy judge recently rejected the sale of Alex Jones's InfoWars to satire news site The Onion.
And people on social media are pointing out the unique circumstances of the situation. One ex-user writing, quote, "BuzzFeed survives by selling Hot Ones to George Soros. This is a real headline, not Mad Libs or AI slop." AI slop. We want more of that phraseology around. So I don't know. I mean, I am not a big Hot Ones viewer. Are you? Do you like that show?
I've seen a few episodes. I watch the ones with a celebrity I'm interested in,
Sure.
but I'm not a, dyed-in-the-wool subscriber, watch every episode kind of person.
Are you worried as a conservative that George Soros is about to buy a chicken wing producing talk show?
I would only have a problem with it if they decide to make the show political at all, because one of the nice things about it now is that it is not political. They do not interview politicians. In fact, Stephanie Cutter, one of the advisors to the Kamala Harris campaign, said in that Pod Save America interview, the autopsy of the Kamala campaign, that they wanted her to appear on Hot Ones and were rejected because they don't wade into politics. And I think the host has talked about that position further in depth in the past, particularly in the 2020 election. I note that there are a lot of buyers behind this, not just the Soros Fund. The host himself, Sean Evans, was also involved in the process and put some money down to become the chief creative officer. And I think there's 2 or 3 other groups involved too. So I'm hopeful that it won't ruin the show. But if it does, I'm not a huge super fan.
Sure.
But I wondered, just conspiratorially, if this is not part of the larger plan from some people on the left to kind of create their version of Joe Rogan.
Well, possibly. I mean, to that point, it is interesting, the Kamala Harris issue, they were genuinely disappointed that they couldn't get on because they thought, not only because it has a very big audience, but it's, the vice president is very fond of exhibiting her love for cooking and food and all of that. They felt it was one of the comparatively few more informal media opportunities that was available to them, and then it ceased to be available. They were rejected from it, as you said, on the basis that the show doesn't do politics. It could be that there is an attempt to get those more well, there's definitely an idea that the left needs more of those kind of Joe Rogan type people, and of course Kamala Harris declined to go on Rogan's podcast during the run-up to the campaign. I'm just kind of reluctant to. George Soros has become such a sort of bogeyman for cultural conservatives, and everything that he or his investment fund get involved in is seen as a sort of drive toward liberal political chicanery of some kind, whereas in fact maybe he just wants a share of those 14 million YouTube subscribers and a potentially many more years of lucrative eating of hot chicken wings.
It does seem like BuzzFeed and all of its parts are going to be sold for scrap. I mean, in addition to this, they recently closed their news division in the past few years, and Vivek Ramaswamy, of all people, is apparently making a bid to buy the whole thing, as they've been struggling recently with making money, which is a pretty fundamental thing in a business. And just as part of a larger commentary about the media and the state of news as well, I mean, it's not just BuzzFeed News, but places like CNN and Vice and other big outlets have been laying off staffers over the past year to year and a half. The Washington Post was a part of this as well. So they're not going to be alone, I think, in maybe having to offload some valuable assets to keep things afloat. It's a legitimate concern through a lot of media companies that things are not going well, and they don't seem to be supplying the right answers for how to make things go better.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely a fair point. And to the point about BuzzFeed specifically, it now seems to be joining a fairly long list of companies that were once sort of heralded as these champions of a brave new world of one kind or another, that were going to be the new wave of media behemoths who would ultimately sort of take the place of bigger legacy media organizations. And what we now see is legacy media organizations and these supposed pioneers all getting into difficulty. Vice was another one of those companies, as you remember, that at one time was seen as like it's going to change everything, and it has figured the digital age out for media companies, and that proved not to be the case, because if you're running a business and you're spending more money than you're taking in, that tends to end badly at some time.
Yeah, and Ben Smith, the head of the news department for a long time at BuzzFeed, who was supposed to be heralding these changes, was behind the decision to publish the full Steele dossier, which had been unverified at the time, but was being briefed to Obama and Trump and other members of the Obama administration as a potential threat from the Russians. They were sued for it, but ultimately prevailed in court. But Ben Smith ultimately left for legacy media, right? He went to the New York Times to become an internal media critic. So I think with him leaving and going to the exact competitor that they were trying to take out through their news division, that was sort of a really big symbol that things were not going as well as they would have hoped, and their model was not successful.
Yeah, I was very critical of the decision to publish the Steele dossier. More broadly, I would say when BuzzFeed had that bigger actual newsroom, they did do some good work at times as well, and they did some good work on Capitol Hill, and they did some good work that was really getting into, you know, more meaty topics. But ultimately, it seems like they never found a business model that could sustain that despite all the talk of it, and that's unfortunate.
I think probably a big part of it is not really knowing who your audience is, because when you have one side of your website that puts together cat listicles and the other site that's trying to do hard breaking news, how do you square those two sides of the aisle? And I'm not sure that you can.
I'm not sure you can. And then there's the whole issue of brand identity and how you sell them to advertisers and all that. It gets very complicated. Perhaps Hot Ones will figure it out in their new iteration. They certainly have the audience to do it. So
let's put George Soros himself on Hot Ones.
That would
see
be
if he can handle the wings.
Literally break the internet.
Yes, exactly. All right, that's going to do it for us today on Rising. As always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.